to another top 5 video. Today we are going to be exploring my top 5 most overrated video game titles. This was as per request by RusselMania. Check out his channel, link below in the description as well as at the end of the video. And before we get started with my list, I do want to put a little disclaimer out there. By no means are these horrible games. They are good games that I simply feel like got too much attention, overshadowed a lot of games that were better. They were games that oftentimes a lot of flaws get overlooked and they are praised. And while they're not horrible games, I feel like that they are definitely not worthy of the amount of hype and amount of praise that they get. That being said, let's hop right into it. Starting this list off with number 5 is Batman Arkham City for the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. Arkham City was the follow-up to 2009's Arkham Asylum. Arkham City took everything from Arkham Asylum, up the ante, promised us a better story, made the combat flow more fluid, gave us an open world, and it was an overall fun experience. However, I feel like Arkham City was not as great as Arkham Asylum. And for that matter, I feel like Arkham Knight was better than Arkham City. My problem with Arkham City was its story. I feel like Arkham City's story set itself up very well, but there towards the middle of it, it just kind of fell flat. I lost interest in the story. I didn't so much care about the narrative anymore. The way that they closed out the narrative disappointed me. I hated how they made Joker the surprise villain at the end. And I know Arkham Knight did it as well, but I feel like the story in Arkham Knight kept you going longer than what Arkham City did. And the open world aspect in Arkham City, I feel like was kind of misplaced. It was more or less, it gave you too much freedom. And I feel like the game could have definitely worked better had the game been more linear and maybe pulled you more into a more narrative-driven plot. Because I feel like something special really was there with Arkham City, but it was not executed very well. Another problem that I had with Arkham City was its combat seemed that there was too much going on. They threw in too many gadgets. They threw in too many different concepts with that, and it was overall unsatisfying. And its boss fights in there were not as unique as they were in Arkham Asylum. The one boss fight, though, that I will give credit to in Arkham City that stands out, is probably one of my favorite boss fights in video games to date, is Mr. Freeze. Mr. Freeze's boss fight was one of the best that video games have had to offer in a very long time. And they really do deserve praise for that boss fight alone. Next up on this list, the next game I want to talk about is the very first Assassin's Creed. Now, you gotta understand, when I first played Assassin's Creed 2 was not yet out. Everybody praised Assassin's Creed. Everybody said I needed to play this game. Everybody said that this was the best game since sliced bread. And I reluctantly went into it. First time that I started this game up, I enjoyed it. I thought its story was interesting, and by no means am I criticizing the story in this game, because Assassin's Creed, the first one, had a very good story. The way that it set it up definitely kept me interested, and that was probably by far what kept me going through the game. But Assassin's Creed was so repetitive in a lot of ways. By the time that I got to the 4th area, I found myself getting bored with the game because it was the same thing over and over and over. Move to the next area, kill the next target, go find an informant, do his side quest, go assassinate this person, go get information from this person, collect this flags. And I just kind of got bored with a lot of the different side quests. The more and more I explored this world, the more and more I was looking for it to be done. So to find out that there were 3 more missions after I got to the 4th area, I was pushing myself through to the end just to rush it and see how this game played out. And I know people say that Assassin's Creed 2 took it in a better direction, gave you more to do, but even Assassin's Creed 2 still felt repetitive to me. I think there are other open world games out there, especially at that time, that were better than what Assassin's Creed gave us. But Assassin's Creed, again, it took that to kind of a more interesting level when it gave us the option to kind of move around the world freely and kind of use the environment to do what we wanted to. That was where Assassin's Creed definitely did shine, and a lot of games have incorporated that mechanic into Assassin's Creed. So Ubisoft definitely does deserve some praise for incorporating a lot of the modern day open world mechanics that we now have today. Next up on this list, the next game that I want to talk about is 2009's Dragon Age Origins. This was BioWare's spiritual successor to the Baldur's Gate series. And while I have really no complaints about its gameplay, I did play it on the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, so I realized that the gameplay was a little bit better on the PC. I'm not going to go too heavy into my complaints with the combat, because I realized I was playing it on an inferior version. But what I will say about the combat is Dragon Age Origins combat definitely was not innovative. It took a very basic formula, very basic concept that had been done before, that feel of an isometric RPG, made it more of a third-person look, but still retained a lot of those same elements that we'd come to expect from those types of games. And while don't fix something that's not broken, what irritated me more than anything was the amount of praise that its battle system was getting when there were games coming out that were using turn-based formulas, that were using other action-based formulas that were still very generic, and these games were not getting were not getting praised as well. But Dragon Age Origins kind of got put up there. This was a great combat system, nothing's wrong with it, and I feel like a lot of that was kind of forced, and it really did irritate me. But more than that, what irritated me more than anything was its story was not as great as people made it out to be. I feel like the story took a very Tolkien-esque approach, didn't really do anything to expand the world, expand the universe. It was all very... the story in Dragon Age Origins, I'm sorry, I just didn't feel like came together very well. That was one of my major complaints about Dragon Age Origins. The last thing I want to say about Dragon Age Origins is the characters of Morrigan, Liliana, and Alistair were amazing. And Oghren was flat out hilarious. I loved those 4 characters. But beyond that, I didn't really find myself caring about any of the other characters in the universe. I really didn't find myself really caring too much to learn more about this world. Many of the plot points and the choices that you were supposed to make, I felt were poorly written. I feel like they didn't evoke the emotion that the developers were trying to get across. Just overall, Dragon Age Origins was a good game, but it definitely is not the grand gem that so many people make it out to be. But it definitely is the best in the Dragon Age franchise. Next up on this list is Dead Space. And let me tell you about Dead Space. Dead Space, for me, was a game that I went in expecting to be a scary game that was supposed to keep me up all night. And while Dead Space is a good action game, it definitely wasn't scary. The amount of people that told me that this game would scare the shit out of me, I expected to go into this game at least changing my underwear 3 times, and it doesn't happen. Most of the jump scares I anticipated, most of the jump scares that were supposed to scare me just didn't. The more and more I invested into this world, the more and more repetitive the gameplay became. The atmosphere was not scary at all to me, and overall, I just kind of felt that the whole experience was not as great as people were making it out to be. Well, more than that, the gameplay was interesting. I did like how you were able to dismember your enemies and use that to kind of go about killing them. You know, just it took the dismembering them to kill them. That was a really, really cool concept. But I kind of feel like Dead Space was just one of those series that got so much praise for being scary when it really wasn't. And Dead Space isn't a horrible game. It's set quite a few staples for action games to definitely follow. But it was its repetitive nature and its lack of being scary that really drove me to be disappointed with this game. And last up on this list, the last game that I want to talk about is one from my favorite franchise of all time. Yes, I'm about ready to butcher a game in Final Fantasy. Now, by no means is this a bad game. By no means do I want people to take this as me completely hating on the game I have chosen, because I still like the game. It's just when it's held up to others in the series, it doesn't hold up as well. And this is Final Fantasy IV. Final Fantasy IV should deserve the praise that it gets for innovating the series, taking the battle system into the direction that it was, taking a more narrative approach for the way that video games did things. You know, back when that story first came out, it was an incredible story. But I feel like the story in itself has not aged very, very well. I feel like there are so many other games, so many other concepts that have made its way into the Final Fantasy franchise that Square Enix has done better. One of the biggest things for me was the sacrifice of the different characters coming back. I thought that was really lame. I kind of wish that they would have kept those characters gone. It definitely added more emotion to the game. Tella was the only character who did disappear or completely die, and I didn't really find myself heartbroken at that time. I didn't care. Tella was not an interesting character. It did nothing for me. You know, at that point, he didn't really have anything to live for, and it was just kind of one of those moments in the franchise that I just found myself not caring about. And I know that's bad to say, because that was supposed to be a very strong moment, but because of certain other aspects from Final Fantasy that have made its way, you know, elements from Final Fantasy VI, Aerith's death from Final Fantasy VII, Tella's it's just not as impactful. Another thing I have a problem with was that some of its characters I feel were not as strong as others in the entries. You know, and there are people who do highly praise a lot of the characters in Final Fantasy IV, and they're good, but they definitely aren't great. And yes, every Final Fantasy has those characters you just find yourself not giving a shit about. Every Final Fantasy has, well, not every Final Fantasy, but most do. You know, and that being said, I mean, Final Fantasy IV, it's not a bad game. I just feel like it hasn't aged well. And it gets so much praise by so many people. Well, Final Fantasy IV is the greatest, and no game can touch that. It's a good game. And I realized that was the birth of a lot of people into the franchise. That holds a special place in their heart. I just don't think it's as great as some people make it out to be. This has been my top 5 most overrated video games. And again, these are all my opinions. If you disagree with anything I said, that's okay. If you liked one of the games that I said was overrated, that's okay. If you think that game deserves the amount of praise that it gets, that is okay. This is just simply my thoughts, my opinions. I challenge you to make your own top 5 overrated video game lists and let the world know what games you think are most overrated. So be sure to hit subscribe there for me to keep up to date with all of my content. You can follow me on Facebook and Twitter. Links are going to be down below in that description box. Be sure to check out RusselMania's channel as well. And remember, guys, most importantly, stay happy, be happy, game happy. The Spoony Bard is checking out.